I made a coffee yesterday, a hot drink yesterday, and I used my froth, and I was like, oh my God, look at these Voronoi patterns on the bubbles. It's just so incredible because I feel like that's the biggest kind of what do you say blessing of being in VFX is that you don't look at things the same anymore. You just look at I mean, I keep talking about water and clouds because that's what I see outside my window. But you look at clouds and you look at the shapes, look at the way they move, and you just find beauty in life. I feel a lot more because you're not just it's not just there in the background, it's always in the foreground, and you're trying to see, okay, next time I do this, how's it going to look? Am I going to make it look like this? Is this my favorite kind? For Houdini Artist, you can even do a technical reel. And, if it's a really impressive technical reel, I do a fair bit of recruitment. When I see somebody has these skills, I know if they are paired up with somebody who has a creative eye, they can produce something good together. So I think it's about finding what you're good at and showcasing that in your reel, and obviously bringing your best attitude to the front, because after all, they're hiring not just, at least that's how one of us we work. We're not just hiring a bum on a seat. We're looking for somebody who can add value to the pictures and to the company. So many artists just keep working with just a 1 year review, and with HR just not knowing what happened on like for the rest of the 11 months. You get feedback from like the first month that you've probably addressed already through the year, but that was what was said back by somebody back in the day. So this, I feel like it depends how you manage a team where you're constantly in touch with your artists, and you're asking, okay, where do you want to go, how do you want to grow, what do you want to do. And that whole process can just change the trajectory of an artist and just change the way they work, and can actually help, it can make them more motivated to come to the office every day and to make more beautiful pictures.
Hi, so today we've got Arpita, who's head of effects at One of Us. And so, yeah, she's going to talk a bit about her career and Houdini, and of course, moving up into this position. So, hi.
Hi, Danny.
It's good to have you on the show. Obviously, we work together at One of Us. But could you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your careers today?
Yes. So I was born and raised in India in a town in the south called Chennai. I'm from Kerala originally, so proud Indian here. And I moved to the UK about like 13 years ago to do my master's at Bournemouth. Yeah, the way I ended up in the industry is purely by chance, because I happened to, I didn't know which course I wanted to take. And then I took this mixed media course where I started doing Photoshop and Illustrator, and I loved it so much. And I was like, okay, I think I'm good at this computer stuff and I like pretty pictures. So I just pursued that. One thing led to another. I came to Bournemouth University and then I entered the industry. Was very fortunate to have my first role at MPC London. And yeah, since then it's been no looking back. Been very fortunate to work at some of really good studios. And now I'm at one of us heading effects.
Yes. So, it's interesting. So, I mean, Chennai actually has quite a big industry, so it's interesting you came to UK first and then started your career. But I guess you were quite young. You were like
Yes, yes. It's
five.
in fact like my first job was in the UK. So I feel, in a way, sometimes when I speak to my Indian friends, and I'm like, oh, I wish I had a little bit of it. The closest I had to working in an Indian studio was when I was leading a DNEG, and I went to the Mumbai office to help them out with training and with like a show and stuff. So that was the only time I had like an Indian experience working. But yeah, it's Chennai does have a very big scene, especially. I don't know whether you heard of this movie Robot, which came out like I think about 5, 6 years ago, and that was like the first VFX movie in India, and it just took the industry by storm. It had, I mean, it had quite, Indian style VFX with like this huge robot made of cell phones that then becomes a snake and then becomes an
Oh,
eagle.
I've seen this. Yes,
Yeah.
people. It would always come out as like the Indian Terminator on all
Yes,
the
yes,
like YouTube
exactly.
clips.
So as you can see, like inspired by a lot of, Hollywood movies, but what I really loved seeing at that point was that, India like felt, Indian cinema felt like we had to step up in our game as well for visual effects. And if you see, there's so much of talent in India in terms of like, lots of software engineers and lots of, like just generally, like if you see Indian art, it's so beautiful. So I love the fact that they're now coming up and they're, looking at bringing VFX into their story. And I think it's going to come of age soon because currently it's still in its infancy where you find VFX being used just to show that, oh, we can do it, but I'm sure there are some movies coming out where it's more subtle, it's more downplayed to aid the storytelling. So yeah.
That's really exciting actually because I think in the industry there's this perception of it just being about outsourcing and roto and match move layout and rotomation and things like that. But what I think is actually really interesting is the VFX for Indian content. And
Mhm.
there was a thing called 24 Hours of Chaos that Chaos Group organised, and I didn't watch all 24 hours because it's 24 hours long. But when I actually was able to log in, it was when they were in India, so they were going around the world. That's how they were doing it 24 hours, and that was fascinating. They had some stuff for game art and some stuff for VR,
Wow.
used in really interesting ways. They were using VR so they have these guys in India who it's a pretty awful job, but they go down into drains and clean them, and it's really dangerous. They have no safety
Wow.
equipment, and so they were using VR to recreate that experience. And part of their intention was to show other people who are obviously maybe from more privileged backgrounds and political leaders and so on, and just go, they're not going to get the smell, they're not going to get the danger, but they're just going to get a sense of like there are people in India, like probably down the road from you, doing this
Yeah.
on this thing and have this experience. I think it's a really fascinating use of that technology to do something quite different. So, and I fascinating that there are great stories. My mother was a big fan of Bollywood movies, so I always kind of grew up watching these musicals and things. Um, and Bollywood is big. I think people don't realize in Europe how big Bollywood is outside of India because it's big in India,
Yes.
obviously. But it's like in Iran. I'm not sure what other countries are watching Bollywood movies, but I know that it has quite a big following in a lot of different countries. I don't know if you know where.
I mean, the funny thing is there are these couple of like, legendary names that just stick around in the industry and they go out and, for example, Shah Rukh Khan, Amitabh Bachchan, like we went to Egypt recently and everybody was, to get your attention, they're like, Shah Rukh Khan, Amitabh Bachchan, Kareena Kapoor. So it's like as if, okay, you call me that, I'm going to come to your shop. But I think yeah, with Bollywood, what's with Indian cinema especially, I think the one thing that's stuck with the audience the most is the dancing, the grandeur of the sets and
Mm.
the songs and dialogues, and I think it's mostly the dances. And I feel sorry to disappoint the international audience, but I feel that that is kind of reducing because there are more movies coming out with fewer songs and more story oriented, and even the context and the storyline is they're more society centric now, so the narrative is changing a bit with Bollywood, I feel.
That's interesting. So moving back to you. So normally I would think if you're into Illustrator and Photoshop, you're going to go into motion graphics, or if you're more into Photoshop, maybe into compositing. But of course, you went into Houdini and FX. So can you just tell me a little bit about that
um,
transition, that journey?
yeah, I think this. So another thing I also tried out at university was 3ds Max, and I
Mm.
remember there was this one. I think it was for animation or something. There was this skeleton that default skeleton that you can drop in and like animate. It was one of our animation modules, and I enjoyed it so much. And it was just so I don't know, I just felt like there was so much in there to explore, and I was like, okay, how can I combine the two together? And then when I went to Bournemouth University, there was, obviously we learned Houdini, and I was like, wow, this is such an intelligent piece of software, it's the best thing ever. And I did Nuke as well, but I felt like I picked up Houdini better and I gravitated towards it more. when I did 3D. So I was like, okay, this seems like something I have a knack for, and I seem to pick up really well, and there's so much of learning material. So it was just this, I think it's just the software and how well it's made and the things it does and how robust is it. It just impressed me from day one. And obviously there's so much of inspiration around you, and I could see what it could do. So I thought, okay, I need to go down this road, and that's how Houdini started.
That's brilliant. So, um, what? So you went from there to NPC.
Mm-hmm.
So what show were you on?
So I started off my very first show was um which was it? Yeah, Narnia, the Voyage of the Dawn Treader.
Okay, cool.
So it was,
So what?
the funny thing is, because I never grew up watching all these Hollywood movies. I grew up with Bollywood, and the only Hollywood movies I used to watch were like, Home Alone, movies like that, which didn't have much VFX in there. Sorry, my throat's a little there. So just coming here and seeing, working on these movies and not knowing how big they were, I think that was a big moment for me where people are like, oh my God, Narnia, I grew up reading them. I was like, oh, okay, yay. And so that was the first movie which, yeah, I got to work with. Like, it was my first exposure to production,
So
to
what were you doing exactly?
so I started off as FX, an FXTD, a junior FXTD, and I did like water, and I did a little bit of, I think, fire, mostly water. And we used
Because
this.
it's a ship.
Sorry? Yeah, it was.
It's all on a ship.
Yeah, it was
So
all on a ship. So this there was a sea creature, the sea snake, I think, if I remember right. And so there was this water interaction and stuff. So like, oh, water, and it just felt like, in a way, FX is so rewarding because you feel like you're you get to create nature, like the most beautiful forms of art you find around you in nature. And by doing effects and by just getting to see, okay, how does water move, and how does light bounce off it, and how does it interact with things around it, and just getting to recreate that on the computer is just so rewarding because you just see it out there and you just see it moving, and you're like, oh my God, that's nature out there in my computer, which I helped create.
so what's your? That's really. So what is your? I guess your research process, your reference process. If you're simulating a phenomena that you're maybe not familiar with,
Mm-hmm.
um, I mean, even water is familiar. Most people go onto the beach and but obviously that's different from the waves crashing against a galleon. So how do you approach, before we get into Houdini, how do you kind of approach that process?
I think it always starts with, obviously what vision the director has for this, which, if you're lucky, you get concept art and you get to see what, which flavor. Because, for example, like clouds, and there's always like an artistic take to things, and there's always which reference you pick that looks right to the director and to you, because clouds are a classic example. It's like there's so many different shapes of clouds, there are so many different kinds of clouds, but you want to go with one that somebody else likes, and or you may pick one that looks really good that somebody else might like. But to walk you through the research process, it's more like you get a theme, and then you spend hours and hours on YouTube just watching reference, go to like BBC stock footage, go to Shutterstock, go to like, you know now there's action VFX if you want to see like elements being shot. And then you just start. It's sort of like, this whole process of trial and error. You start with bite-sized parts of the same effect, and then you see how it works. You get to know, okay, these are the controls, this is how I need to scale it up, this is how I need to make it more directional. If I get notes, how am I going to incorporate into the setup? And so slowly, as you go on, you tend to build this robust setup that can, address notes as well as hit creative notes. And it just, yeah, it that's the whole process. And then of course, like, lighters and lighting and shading plays such a huge part, because otherwise it's just effects and, on the screen, and Houdini doesn't really make it. So I think it's a whole process of first understanding the motion of things. That's, I think, the biggest part of effects, is understanding how natural it can look and how natural you can make it look. And then after that, how do you embed it? How do you fit it in, which is where your expertise comes in as well, Dan.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. I hope I answered that
um,
question. I went a little bit off track there with
no, no, that is a question. Do you think it affects how you look at things? When you look at when
100%.
you're on the just on the beach or you're washing in the bath, do you like start looking at the
I
water?
mean, 100%. Like, I made a coffee yesterday, a hot drink yesterday, and I used my froth, and I was like, "Oh my God, look at these Voronoi patterns on the bubbles." It's just so incredible because I feel like that's the biggest kind of what do you say, blessing of being in VFX is that you don't look at things the same anymore. You just look at I mean, I keep talking about water and clouds because that's what I see outside my window. But you look at clouds and you look at the shapes, look at the way they move, and you just find beauty in life. I feel a lot more because you're not just it's not just there in the background, it's always in the foreground, and you're trying to see, okay, next time I do this, how's it going to look? Am I going to make it look like this? Is this my favorite kind? So yeah, it's I think I love it. Like I love doing this so much. I love being in this field so much. It's so rewarding, like not to put other jobs down, but I feel like there's so much to look forward to every day because every challenge is so different and so creative. It's very rewarding.
It's really cool. It's funny for those that are just on audio that as soon as she said beauty in nature, your cat emerged from
Yes.
beneath the screen. So if you hear a little bit of rumbling during that speech, that was those were paws.
Yes, and
Um,
if you hear a pour as well, he's really happy to be on here as well.
yeah, we tried putting him away before the podcast, but he's like, no, this is my moment of fame, and I'm
Yeah.
going to be in the podcast. So he is. What's his name?
His name is Pulley. So we
Puli.
we just got this. So we went to Egypt and we saw so many cats there. We kind of very impulsively decided before we landed that we're gonna pick up two cats before we come home. So so we just got two cats and they're in
In Egypt.
No, we got them here in the UK, but we decided in Egypt that we would get them here. We tried from there, but we didn't think it was a very good plan.
No, it's difficult. I imagine it'd be very complicated.
It would be.
Um, so yeah, so let's see. So also, um, we did a quick jump because there are some people that are trying to break into the industry, especially FX, and I think it's interesting to just break down. You graduated from university and then you went to MPC. So how did you get that role? What happened there?
So, I mean, there are different ways, right? People enter the industry. The funny thing is, I came the traditional route of going to university, and because Bournemouth University is really, highly regarded in the industry generally, especially for 3D. So and Houdini. So I feel like things worked out for me quite well. Very grateful for that. But there are some people who obviously come in through other routes, like if they did they know somebody and they did some kind of an internship somewhere, or they came in from the production side, or somebody might come in from like a completely different background. Like, I know so many people who are chemical engineers who just Houdini artists now, mathematicians and all this. So the way you enter the industry, and I guess the requirements, is just having a passion for it and having something that a studio would think that, okay, this person could add value to my studio as a person first. And of course, having a good show reel, so showing that you have the skill set. And I always say this, like, you don't need the best coolest movies in your show reel to get into a studio. What you need to show is that you have the potential to do something that's cool with what you've already done. So even if it's a home project, even if it's but if you did a good job at it, like for example for Houdini Artist, you can even do a technical reel. And if it's a really impressive technical reel, I do a fair bit of recruitment. When I see somebody has these skills, I know if they are paired up with somebody who has a creative eye, they can produce something good together. So I think it's about finding what you're good at and showcasing that in your reel, and
Yeah.
obviously bringing your best attitude to the front, because after all, they're hiring not just, at least that's how one of us we work. We're not just hiring a bum on a seat. We're looking for somebody who can add value to the pictures and to the company. So I think, to summarize that, I would say obviously a good show reel, and the other element I feel which is really important is showing that you're, open to learning and open to growing in the studio, because that is always helpful when you want to come and work in a team, because you're applying as an individual, but you're never going to output something as an individual. You're always going to give out something as a team.
Absolutely, especially with effects, where you've got people before you and after you. So this is one thing that's a bit unfamiliar to me in compositing is the idea of a technical reel. So could you just like explain that to me a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, a technical reel is pretty much, not having a beautifully comped and lit render, but you're just showing something that a tool you made, or your process of building a tool, or just an application of something where you're just, okay, this, these are controls, this is what it can do, and this is, where it can be used. So a technical showreel is pretty much just showing your technical skills. And I say just because that's really important, but uh, that is also something that you can do, because Houdini, after all, it's quite like, in terms of tool building, it's quite big. So how do you can, like, because the thing is, with a final image, there's so many ways to get there. But if you want to show how you got there, that's when you want to show a technical reel. Like, this is the tool. It could be as simple as rain, which is there across the board. But maybe you have a really clever tool that does rain procedurally, where you just move your pointer and it just rains there. You dial a slider and then it has different kinds of rain. You just dial another slider and it changes the direction. And you do one more thing and lightning turns on. So that's such an intelligent tool, but nobody would know that if they just saw a comp of it.
Yeah,
So that's an example of a technical reel, for example.
but because of course that rain tool would mean that you could do 50, 100 shots really
Yeah,
efficiently, and that's the
absolutely.
thing. Whereas that beautifully comped shot could have been a nightmare for the compositor and lighting to make it work. So
100%. Yeah.
yeah, that's really cool. So Houdini. So, as you said, you mentioned some chemical engineers and mathematicians, and this is very much the perception of Houdini, right? That you have to be like a genius and a scientific expert. Is that true? Do you think to learn Houdini you really need? Were you very good at science at school? Very good at maths?
The funny thing is, when I was in school, I wanted to be like a scientific journalist, because I used to watch all these Nat Geo and Discovery Channel. I still love watching them, and I still wonder what my life would have been if I'd pursued that. I just, I definitely had a thing for art. So I feel like I've come in more from the art side than the 100% technical side, because I still I'm still like, if, for example, like Python, I can read and I can understand it, but I can't, write so much in Python. But that doesn't stop me from producing a good looking effect at the end, and doing all this work that I've done so far, which I'm quite proud of, because I put in that creativity and that expertise from a different angle. But to answer your question, no, you don't have to come from 100% technical background. It helps. It always helps when you know more, like when you know more about, how the solvers work. I've learned it through trial and error on the job. But if somebody comes in with that knowledge from school or college, or has written a paper on it, it gets even better, because you get there a lot faster. So it's about how much or how less you want to understand how the tool works to build more of it, or you want to use what somebody else has made, because that's their strength to build the tools, but your strength is how do you make use of it in the best way. So you need both kinds of people in the industry. I feel in a department you need both these kinds of people.
Really cool. So another question about your department is I'm interested. What is who stuff comes to you from? Like who's before you in the pipeline? Who's sending you stuff, and who you're sending your work to? So that I thought was a little bit of an interesting question, and how you work with both those your kind of input and output.
Yeah, so like you said, it this is FX is kind of bang in the middle of the of the pipeline, because we have a lot of dependencies that come in, and the other departments that have dependencies from us. So it depends on what kind of a show you're on, right? So the first show, if one kind of a show, if it's quite creature driven, and your effects is like, suppose you're doing stuff on a like, for example, like I said, Narnia, it's like my main upline kind of would be the where I'm expecting work from is animation. So animation, match move, I think these two are the biggest departments that have, most massive influence on how the effects goes. And then from effects, it goes to lighting. Many of us effects artists, we like to light our own work, but otherwise it goes to lighting, and then it goes to comp. I mean, of course there's like all the layout and the assets, and all of them who do so much of work, which then comes into match move. But to tell you what affects the most is match move and animation, because especially because in effects we do simulations, and sometimes something might look good from a camera, but you'll find that his hand flips in a different way, which can push smoke or water or something else or particles somewhere in a different direction, which looks a little strange. So there's this constant back and forth between match move animation effects, match move animation effects, because it's like a feedback loop, right? You tend to say, okay, this works, maybe you could remove this so much and make it work well from this angle. So yeah, I'd say, and of course, like for us to give comp the elements that you guys need, the AOVs. So it's making sure that you're giving as much as possible from us, so that it can be revisited if it had to be, or enhanced or dialed down in comp. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, because the same effect can be played in so many different ways
Yeah, yeah.
when it hits comp. And I think it's also the thing of that you're lighting your own work. That's, I mean, one of us is very much in that. I believe, if it's still the same as when I was there, it's very much in that most of the effects artists light their own effects. Was that the same at other companies like DNEG and MPC where you were working?
Not really, no, because because one thing is that, like, we work at one of us, we don't work so much on a department basis, as you know. It's more show based, and much like a lot like other studios are doing nowadays. But I guess if it's something that requires it, again, everything comes down to the nature of the show, right? If it's something that requires consistency across the board, like when I was on Greyhound, we had like, I don't know if you watched it, there was so much of water in there, and obviously we needed consistency. So and also when the effects is quite large in scale, you just want to make sure that you're using your time doing the effects, because there are lighters available. So I think it boils down to what is the need of the hour. Is it something that needs to be put across multiple shots? In that case, okay, if a lighter is built a tool, then it makes sense to use that to produce something that's not too far from a different shot. But if it's like a one-off, there are so many times I've seen people who express interest that I'd like to light my own stuff. So yeah, it's a mix of both. I think it's down to what the show demands and what, like, how best to get to the outcome, I would say, if that
Yeah,
answers your question.
no, that does. And this show based and department based. So just for those, we obviously work together, and I know what you're talking about. But there's one approach, one setup in some studios where all the match movers sitting together, all the rotor artists sitting together. There are FX artists, animators, and they're all talking to other animators, and then there are FX artists talking to other FX artists, the lighters talking to other lighters, and then there are compers talking to other compositors, mostly sitting in the same room. Sometimes there are practical reasons, like compositors might want the room dark,
Oh
and
gosh, yes.
no one else does.
Yes.
Maybe lighters, but yeah. So, but then there's show based, which is like we're working on Pinocchio. Everyone is sitting together. One of the great things was like, I could come and talk to you and Chris and sort of say, look, I need this pass or that. Is that possible? Is that going to be a nightmare to make? And you were obviously talking really closely with Costa, and you were doing this quite big. There was a big fish
Yeah.
jumping out of the sea, and it wasn't really. It was quite stylized, right, based on
Yeah.
the concept art. So there was also this element. It was a huge element. It was integrating with real play, and it was very stylized, very sort of children's book illustrated
Yeah.
style. So there was a lot going on. So I think there are advantages to both. But
Yes.
in your personal experience, which do you prefer?
So I think it's always good to be in. I feel like you shouldn't be too far off from where your department is, and not when I say department, I feel like there should be something that connects you to your tribe, which is your effects department. but you need to be around with your team. Like I don't think there's anything bad sitting with effects artists, like if you're sitting with your actual department, but you make it a point to constantly communicate, because communication is what is important, right? To make sure that you're available, that you're speaking to your compo, you're speaking to your lighter, you're conveying to your animator what you need, and even with your supervisors. So it's beneficial, I guess. Why studios like to keep the shows together is so that they know some people might either a not want to get up from their desk and go and speak to somebody, and you just might keep chatting all day, which slows things down. I mean, chatting as into the person instead of going to their desk and just showing them something. Or could be some people are just not so that, like, maybe communication is not their preference or like their forte. So just to make things easier, I feel is something that's come along where you can just like swivel your chair and be like, okay, can we work on this, or can we discuss this? But what I think they're both, pros and cons to it. The risk of it, if studios don't acknowledge that you do need to share knowledge, share like development setups and things within the department, is that you could keep reinventing the wheel in a company where you find that some show has something which is doing something a certain way, and another show is doing completely like the same thing all over again. And that is why it's important to have something, like a thread that kind of knits all the shows, similar minded kind of TDs together. And that's precisely why I'm also in this role I'm doing now, which is because we work really well, show based. It's worked really well for us, but I've, I've like we've been noticing that, okay, how much of talks really happen within the department, and how much can we do show and tells, like how much can we share what we learn from a show. So I think that part we shouldn't forget, because the combined kind of IP of the department is what makes us take on more challenging projects and do more challenging effects, and kind of continue to be inspired. Otherwise, if you get these small shows where you're just working on it in isolation, you never there's like the inspiration also kind of is limited. Also because with security increasing now, sometimes you could be working for like months in a show and not even be exposed to what's happening on another show, unless you have a friend who's saying that, hey, I'm doing this really cool effect, this is how I'm doing it. So those kind of things you miss out on when you're working entirely exclusively show based.
Yeah, and do you think that's even more difficult? I mean, the security is one aspect, and the other is obviously work from home. People are working from home
Yeah.
more. Are you back in the office at one of us now? Are you still all from home? Are you
Yeah, so
hybrid?
there's like we work blended. So one of us had always given the option whether what suits you better, whether how are your home conditions, is it conducive for where are you most productive, come there and work. I think that should, like, that's how every studio should work. You shouldn't be, I mean, if I say should as like absolute form, but I think that would be the best way forward, because you could save so much time on commute. Your kind of breaks could be different. And just again, if like the I feel coming into the office is important, because there's a social aspect where you just tend to, when you're sitting next to somebody, you just you just learn in a different way. And I feel it depends on which level you are at. Like if you're a senior and you work pretty well in isolation independently, by all means, work from home as much as you want. But especially when you're entering the field, when you're a junior, coming into the office is so important, it's so vital, because you get to, first of all, take in the environment, see what's going on around you, know what it's like, perhaps go sit in a daily's room, or and for them to actually learn something, there needs to be mids and seniors as well in the office. So I feel like having this kind of blended style is definitely the way forward, because people have personal circumstances as well, which they feel, okay, I'm not feeling too well, but I don't want to miss work. you know that's
Yeah.
that's the best thing I feel that's come out of this whole thing, this pandemic, because I feel that this is something we never thought we could do as an industry, is working from home. And I was so envious of, my banker friends and like other industries like
Mhm.
marketing, advertising, like, oh, I don't feel like going to work today. I'm just gonna work from home. Like, damn you. So I feel like that is something good that's come out of this, that we can obviously, like this, if somebody wants to breach security, they can do it anyway. Like even if
Yes.
you're working in the office, it's nothing that stops you unless you function like Big Brother and watch every move. But I feel that it's really good. I feel where we are right now. The one again, the one thing I'm quite wary of is that people work differently, and if somebody doesn't express themselves enough or communicate enough, working from home can be quite risky to the progress of the show. So it's important that people know how to work from home as well. So that's
Yeah,
yeah.
I was also going to say that I think effects is a little bit more difficult to monitor than something like comp. Comp, you can sort of
Mm,
show an image in dailies kind of every day, even on a
yeah,
big shot that you can't finish in a day, even a shot that might take several weeks or several months. You can show what you've done in yesterday or the next day,
yeah,
and it's relatively quick, right? Whereas effects, it can seem like nothing is happening for quite a long time, and then boom, 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 all this
yeah.
amazing stuff happens. So in terms of management, I guess that's quite difficult, right?
It can be
Someone could
quite.
just be doing nothing.
No, I think it can be quite tricky. Are you like asking from a managing point of view, or is it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, like first of all, I think that's like a whole different topic, managing people and how you manage a team. It's because people work so differently, right? It's down to the lead, to the manager to understand how their team works. Somebody might just like to be left alone for the whole day. They don't like somebody else giving input. All they need is a check in to see, okay, am I going in the right direction? Whereas somebody else might need a little more, support, or a little more, just generally wanting to brainstorm a little more. So it's about understanding how each person works and just, helping them help you move the project forward and on time. So it's that, I feel it's that kind of a delicate balance.
Is that another reason for having an FX a head of department? Because obviously every supervisor comes from a different background and will be incredibly strong. Perhaps they might have come from lighting or compositing, and they might not be so strong in effects. And so even their expectations in terms of targets and results and timescales might not be plausible within this different department. They might be. So is there an advantage, to having someone who's in management specifically from that each role?
I think that is one of the there's definitely one of the main objectives of having, is to how do you make sure that we're integrated as a department into the company, and how we're making sure that the needs are met of the department, and as well as making sure that it ties in with the bigger picture. And I think that is definitely something that helps productivity, that helps a better output, and that actually, even just to give you a small example, like so many artists just keep working with just a 1 year review, and with HR just not knowing what happened on like for the rest of the 11 months. You get feedback from like the first month that you've probably addressed already through the year, but that was what was said back by somebody back in the day. So this, I feel like it depends how you manage a team, where you're constantly in touch with your artists, and you're asking, okay, where do you want to go, how do you want to grow, what do you want to do. And that whole process can just change the trajectory of an artist and just change the way they work, and can actually help, you know it can make them more motivated to come to the office every day, and to make more beautiful pictures. So
Yeah.
that part of managing, I feel, is something which is I think highly overlooked, because we're so picture driven, we're so productivity driven. I feel like sometimes we miss the people element.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think that and FX is very big in that you can branch within FX, you can specialize in different ways. And someone might be not very good at one of them and might be incredible at another.
Yes.
And so I guess it's an element of spotting
Yes.
that.
Yes, 100%. So you need to, like, there's no point putting somebody who's excellent at fire, putting them doing, like, procedural stuff, because they're more into dynamics. and vice versa. So like I personally have like an immense love for procedural effects, and I don't think, like doing large scale, like, destruction is something that I would even be inclined towards doing. So it's my, like, if I had a lead or a supervisor, I would make sure, or I would trust that they acknowledge that and don't put me on something. Of course, what needs to get done needs to get done, and sometimes if you're the only person available, you can't just say no. But I think it's important also for you as an artist, right? You need to express and tell somebody, and I guess having somebody who's managing that should be in a position that you're allowing people to come and express something to you as well. So it's I think it's a two-way road. Like you need to be you need to want to be managed, and you also need to be a good manager, so that together you can help the studio that you're working at.
Cool. Looping round to like something we touched on earlier, and your role in recruitment. So, from that, what are the sort of do's and don'ts you've seen from people's reels and applications?
So I think, like I said before, what I look for most in a reel, like we go through, myself and the recruitment manager, we go through quite a few reels for effects, and also another supervisor. So I think what we look for most is like, okay, what's the quality of the pictures? Like, does it look different? That is one thing, and the second thing is how much of diversity. This is something I look for a lot. How much of variety and diversity can you look for, can you convey in this 2 minute, 1.5 minute reel? Because sometimes I've seen some reels, the ones that are probably not so successful, is that they have 10 shots of fire. I'm like, okay, in the first and second shot, I know you can do fire. What else can you do? How else can you use this? So even if you're a fire expert, what are the different ways you can use it? What are the different, how can you make it more interesting? So, and of course, like, because, Houdini it's just forever growing and changing, and like they keep adding more and more tools. How much are you keeping up with that? Like, are you still doing only one kind, but that means you call yourself a specialist, or you call yourself effect generalist. So what is really your strength? And I feel there's no point trying to put variety also just for the sake of it. But obviously you want quality in there as well. You want to make an impression in the first, like, 30 seconds, so also put your best work in the front. So there are a few things there. So I guess if I had to, like, put it down into pointers, I would say A is to have a snappy reel. So, just make sure that it's not more than like 2 minutes long, because otherwise people imagine, like, from your point of view, you want to put all your work in there, but from a recruiter's point of view, they're seeing hundreds of it in a day. So how do you want to make the maximum impact in the shortest amount of time? And then put your best work at the front, but also leave something for the end, so that people, there's a slight tease to go to the end and stay on till the end, and, oh, okay, what else do they know, and then look them up on LinkedIn. And then I would say third thing is, from an FX point of view, is show your skill set in terms of, like, okay, what all can you do? How much can you see this person, working across the board? Or, like, because if they're amazing at water, I have a show only for like 3 months in water, I don't have a show for water, then I won't hire them. So it's like, how do you appeal to a studio, and also, seeing the kind of work the studio does, and making sure your reel fits with that, because you don't want to just send the same thing everywhere and just, like, expect to be, like, you need to understand what kind of a studio you're applying to, what the kind of work is, and you'll get an idea of how the recruiter thinks as well, because that they'll lean towards the work they see in the reel will be more relevant to the work they have in the studio that they're going to hire them for.
Yeah,
So it's all these things. And then the interviewing is a whole different process.
brilliant. And what apart from so before the interview, apart from the show reel, I was going to ask about the other things like LinkedIn's application letters and CVs. Is there anything that again are like red flags in those, or that are really positive in those kind of aspects? I know the show reel is obviously taking the precedence, but
I think, yes, showreel, because It again boils down to who your recruiter is. Some might take the time to go through your LinkedIn description, and that where you write what you really. I mean, me personally, when I go through somebody's application, I like to see what they, how much, like, if I can see that their description exudes a lot of like enthusiasm and positivity, then I'm more drawn towards that. And but that doesn't mean to say, like, I think one of them said, like, I like beer, pugs, and rock and roll or something like that. So, and but then I saw their review was so cool. So, and we did actually hire them. So it depends, I think, down to, I feel like your showreel is definitely 80%, but obviously your attitude and how you come across is, it makes a big difference.
Absolutely. Um, and any favourite shows of all the shows you've worked on? Do you have any particular favourites?
The funny thing is, like, the I enjoy working on more like the smaller and mid-scale shows than the massive shows. Of course, like the fact that I got to work, I feel like I got it right in time to make it for the final Harry Potter. When I joined MPC, it was the Deathly Hallows Part 2, like 1 year late. If I graduated, I would have missed this franchise. So I'm really pleased to have jumped on the train to do a little bit of Harry Potter. And uh, and I mean, it's really hard to pick a project. I've been loving all the projects at one of us, that we've been doing. Like, we worked on like Pinocchio, Discovery of Witches, and like even the show I'm working on right now, Man Who Fell to Earth, is really. I've been like, it's hard to pick a favorite, but I think for me, a favorite project is a good project is where I've learned a lot. I've been able to deliver a lot, and also one where I've been happy with the output. So, and it's been a good working experience. So I look at it less as the movie as such. Of course, having a nice title is good, but I feel, what has the total experience been? And that is a good project to me.
Yeah, really cool. And I don't think you answered that question. You said what your kind of project would be your favorite, but you didn't say one. Very diplomatic. I can see why you're moving up into the rank, up through the ranks. So, what do you think? What developments do you think are the most interesting in terms of effects? Obviously, Houdini, side effects are adding new things to Houdini, but there are other things outside of side effects. What do you think is going to be important in the next few years or in the near future?
You mean what outside of effects?
I mean, not actual the within software development or within technologies. Which things are going to affect what you do the most, or
I think,
for good or bad?
Mm, there's nothing bad really. I think it's always so obviously Unreal is taken the industry quite by storm. So the extent to which things can be done in Unreal, of course, that makes that either you tend to redirect some things that come into FX, could be that sometimes are not so quick to turn around or not so efficient to for the need of for the current requirement. I feel like Unreal's taking a lot of that, which is great. And of course, in comp as well, the way Nuke is going with all the machine learning and with like all the effects that you can do in comp. I was joking there, I was like, you guys are gonna put us out of our jobs because there's so much that you can do in Nuke now. So I think that is one thing. And I think within effects as well, there are so many of these specialist plugins and softwares that are coming out, like Embergen, like you know Jenga effects, or I think that's what it's called. And there's like various plugins in for Houdini, and Weta released some of their tools. So a lot of these studios that have so much of this, of like this intellectual expertise within, they tend to like package it and sell it to the market to other studios to use because it's worked really well as a tool on one show of theirs. So I feel those kind of small bits here and there, they're coming up. But obviously the big one is Unreal, and real time and GPU related software and productivity in general. So I feel those are the things to watch out for. Everything virtual production related, I feel, is now the buzzword. Everybody is really keen on that because it's adding a lot of value on production and post production.
But Houdini, you can export a lot of tools to Unreal, right? You can actually you've got the Houdini engine, so you can
Yes,
make a tool and
yes,
give it to a
yes,
real-time artist
yes.
to render.
I must confess I haven't tested that out just yet because we've been really busy on other shows, but that's something I'm really keen to try out.
Cool. Do you ever like bring people in specifically because maybe they've done the thing that you haven't had time to look at?
Yes, I think that would be a good way to if somebody has already tried something out. I think yes, 100%. If you see that they've done what they've done in a really nice and pleasing way and really successful way, yes, 100%.
Brilliant. Um, and so, what's next for you? So you're as I understand it, you've recently been promoted to head of effects, but in reality, you've been kind of doing this role unofficially for some time.
I mean, yeah,
And
just like a month or so, no more than that. So
okay, so it's new. So what are
yeah,
your
it
plans?
is.
What are your plans with your new role?
It's I would say I would say it's more about helping the team be the best they can be. That's really what my I'm not head of effects because I'm the best in effects in the company, not at all. I'm head of effects because I feel like I can rally people in a way that helps, and I can identify things perhaps that others couldn't be bothered to. Maybe not that they can't. If they tried, I'm sure they would. But and also just to perhaps, like we spoke about earlier, just to tie different departments together, they need to be representatives that make sure that okay, we're all on track, we're all on the same page, because you might find in some cases that one one team is performing in a completely different way from the rest of the company. That may be in a good way, or it can be even in an unproductive way, and it's only until it's gone too far that you sometimes realize that, oh my god, we need to direction change. So I guess being in this position, and also the other heads of discipline that are coming into play now, it makes the job of a company running smoother a lot easier, because it's quicker to know what's going on in each of these domains when you have a heads off and a head off. And also, just like I said, helping with performance reviews and just making sure that people have a sounding board for ideas, for requests, and just making sure that, like, bringing in new talent, and just making sure that we're on track. That's what I hope to do, and I'm already trying to do with this role.
Very, very cool. And on top of all of this, as if that was enough, you also run like a vegan cooking Instagram account. Is it just on Instagram? Or is it on other platforms? I'm not
I
sure.
know it's only on Instagram, and it's something I picked up actually when there was a little bit of downtime when I was, yeah, I think maybe like 5 years ago or something. I come from a family of amazing cooks. My dad's an amazing, brilliant cook. So, and my mom as well, my grandmother. So and like my husband's family as well. So it's this wealth of like culinary inspiration around me that got me going, and I feel I have a little bit of it in my genes as well. And and my husband, he's actually he's into self development, which is why I'm really like passionate about it as well, and I bring a lot of that into effect. So we share this combined passion for it, and that's why we like always just go go go. And so he encouraged me to start this, okay, why don't you set up a company? It's so easy to set up a company in the UK. Just register yourself on HMRC, and just like call yourself some things. I call myself Plateful of Bliss. And I do plant-based food, and I held a couple of events and supper clubs as well. So what I like to do is bring a twist to like the Indian flavors, because I feel like Indian food here is usually only like tikka masala or some sort of I don't know, butter chicken something, but there's so much more to it. And also, because I'm plant based, I want to bring that. I want to highlight that part of the Indian cuisine. And I come from Kerala, where our diet is predominantly plant based. Of course, there's like a lot of meat that's consumed in the country, but if you look at the traditional kind of meal that we have in a banana leaf, it's all vegetarian, and if you substitute some of the ingredients it becomes fully plant based. So I love sharing that kind of food with people, and just of course where you get inspiration from. Like, food is the universal language, I feel, of people. Like, you connect with so many people just talking about food, your favorite dishes, or you, when you go to a new country, you understand what people, what's important to them through the food they eat and how they eat their food. So it's really, and also it's like so gratifying, right? When you eat something good, you feel good, and then everything else is taken care of when your hunger is is taken care of. So
It's true. I mean, even your productivity, right? If you and one of the things I think with obviously vegetarian, but most a lot of Indian foods had a lot of dairy content generally, right? Like ghee and butter
yeah.
and things like that. So, but when you make it fully plant based, I guess it's lighter. You know, if you have this, if you have it for lunch, for example, you're going to do more work on the on your plant based food than you might if you had a you know, a curry that's got a lot of ghee and butter and
Yeah,
stuff in it. You know.
I mean, I'd like to think so, because I mean, there are so many people who do a lot even after having this. But I think there's merit in exploring this, because like, there are many reasons people also go plant based. Some, like for example, if you went plant based, I can imagine it would be for how you feel. Some people do it for the planet. Some people do it for animals. So there are different reasons why people are plant based. But I do think that, of course, like, plant based food digests a lot faster and leaves your system a lot more. So a lot quicker than meat. Apparently, it stays in your system for like 72 hours or something, whereas
Uh,
plant-based food goes through in like less than 24. So I think, yeah, it's quite it's a huge passion of mine. I started off, I've been vegetarian for majority of my life. I turned vegetarian in when I was like 13 or so, because a small funny story there, my dad used to take me to the butcher to get a Sunday chicken for making something, and I was like, oh, let me come with you. And every time I would hear, because it was so fresh, I could hear the chicken like and then like pap, it would just stop. And
oh wow, was this in the UK
no,
or
no, no, in India,
in India?
back in India.
Okay,
So
yeah, that makes more sense. Yeah.
I was like, what?
Although probably I would rather be that chicken than the chicken that's in Tesco, right? Like I mean, if I
Yeah.
had to be a chicken that was going to get eaten, I think I'd much rather be the one in your town that's like running around until boom, than the
I
chicken
want
that's
to
going
be the kind of chicken that sees its life till the end.
to. Yeah, okay, fair enough. That's the best
That's the
option,
best
but
chicken, the
the
best kind of
least bad
chicken.
is the free chicken.
Yes, yes. What I feel, Danny, is that because when you consume meat, it's like you're having, it's one nutritional group. Whereas when you're eating plant-based food and you're eating an array of things, you get a lot more. And I feel that is where the key is, because, and also when somebody goes plant-based, it's like this whole kind of journey where you go on like, oh, how am I going to replace my protein, how am I going to replace my B12, and you just start becoming more mindful of how you eat and what you eat. I think that is where the penny drops for many people when they turn plant-based. So when you're not plant-based, it's almost like somebody can just keep eating without realizing what they're eating, but then when you focus on what you're actually eating, then that makes a huge difference.
And I guess, although this seems completely unconnected from what you do in Houdini, in a way, Houdini is kind of like, it's like kind of like a recipe book, isn't it? There is an element
So
of
profound.
cookery in a place.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh gosh. Maybe that's why maybe that's how I connected the two together as my two chosen paths. No, I think it's definitely because it's just so much you can do in it. I mean, I could go on like, talking good things about Houdini for like ages. So I think that's what I'm kind of known for as well. I think it's just so, what's amazing about it is that there's no one way of doing things, which is how, like, if you think of people are different, they're wired differently, they think differently, they like to do things differently, and this software is just so, it's just so well made that it actually allows people to bring out their creativity in their own way. And that's what I just love about it. And like you said, it's like a recipe book, and there's so much to learn, there's so much to test, and it's just so rewarding to play with it, because you can, with so less time, you can go so far, and you can test so many things. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really it's really fun. I've never got very far. I've started learning and then bounced off
It
into
can
something
be a
else.
little bit of a steep learning curve, but it shouldn't be too difficult, especially because Nuke is also like so many softwares are now going node based. So it shouldn't be much of it's the resources you pick to learn in the stages. Like if you go to an advanced tutorial and you're going to be like, whoa, this is too much. But I think it's finding a mentor, somebody who might be, like happy to just give you resources, like do this, do that. And there's so many, like there are absolutely so many tutorials out there. And the thing about also like Houdini is not just for effects, like it's being used in so many different fields, like for AI, for like in medicine, for like in space research. So it's quite diverse as well. I'm not being paid to say this. I just
No,
generally love it.
but if side effects want to give you some money, they can come and
Yeah, sure.
do that.
No,
So I
but
didn't know about the
seriously,
space
I mean,
research. That's interesting.
yeah.
So because you can sim things in a realistic way, I
Yeah.
guess you can use it for real things.
Yeah, yeah, it's just it's brilliant. And I think everybody who has a kind of a passion for 3D should definitely explore it. There may be your tool of choice. I feel after all, at the end of the day, it's just which tools you use to produce something. So it's not like one thing is the best to do some. It's like I've said this at I think multiple points, like what gets you there quickest. I think that is where from a production point of view, that's how you should go as to which is the quickest way to solve a problem.
Because you haven't always worked with Houdini in production. Sometimes you've had to work with other softwares
I
too.
did like at the
Sometimes.
beginning I did work with Maya and Flowline, and it was like you learn different things, from different applications. So it's necessary to try, otherwise your learning would be and your experience would be quite one dimensional. So it's important to go out and test different things so that what like you start to even think differently in problem solving even within Houdini when you've worked in other software. So I think it's really important to have that exposure. Plus, it's good to keep abreast with what's going on out there.
Absolutely, and also it's interesting how pretty much every artist I've worked with has quite a good knowledge of Nuke. Like sometimes, I mean, maybe they're not quite a compositor,
No.
but within the realms of how they put things together, it's like
I think yeah,
oh,
because like in order to present your work in the best way, you do need to like it's there's no point going in dailies and saying that, oh, I have this and this is something that they can use, and like basically you show something and you're like, but this can be done in comp, like okay, but you want to show me how, like a snippet or preview of what they could do so that I can understand this context better.
yeah. I
So
mean, like
no, no. So yeah, so that's why it always helps. I think every effects art. I feel I think my dream would be if if an artist got to spend a week in every department of the company. I feel like if a company did that regularly, allowed an artist to do that and take the time out to actually understand the entire pipeline, our our I feel our appreciation for other departments, the way we handled work and the way we, like just generally our what we produce would be so much better because we just know how things work. We just understand how things work and it would be a lot better.
I mean, you do get these dead periods between shows as well when you're not assigned to a show, and it would be perfect to just say, okay, you know what? Can you go and shadow the animation department for a week?
Yeah, I think it's
And then you're going to start your next show, but just go and shadow them. And
mm,
if you know what you're doing, you can even try and animate something, even if they throw it away. I don't. It doesn't matter.
yeah,
But
it's good. Like, maybe like yeah, it's down to the artist to express it. I'm gonna try to be like, no, we got other stuff to do. I don't know.
I think it's tricky because you do want to present yourself as a specialist. People,
Yeah.
in the industry, and there are you do see these shows where someone's like, "Look, I'm a compositor VFX artist, and I do," and they have you clearly they know a million things, and none of them are very good. Like so, there is that sort of almost like you don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
But at the same time, once you've got your skill set nailed, you do want to break out and
Yeah.
like, okay, now you've got your speciality locked. you're gonna have to update it because
Gonna go
everything
back,
changes.
go back all the way around
But
and go.
you want to go around and have a
Yeah,
look at the other things, see what else is
yeah,
happening, see
yeah.
what the other departments do, because it's even like the things you can produce in terms of mats and controls for comp
Mm,
effects are incredible. I mean, it's not just your spec pass and your lighting passes or the beauty passes, but it's things like the length of the hair,
mm,
the age of the hair, the temperature of the fire, the temperature of the smoke, the time the smoke left the fire to the lifetime of each bit of smoke. So you can change, for example, you could you could adjust the color of the flames based on the temperature.
yeah,
And you could do that in comp because you would have a mat.
yeah,
Say this is like 2,000 degrees and
yeah,
this is like 50 degrees.
yeah,
And things like that and embers and you can just invent mats. You can just in comp kind of go, well, could I have a mat that tells me, I don't know, this random thing, and they'll be like, I don't know, and then they'll come back, yeah, we can
yeah,
actually, I can do this and I can do that, and then it's like, oh wow, yeah, that's perfect,
yeah,
it's exactly what I want. Can I have a mat for where my t-shirt is unraveling? Yeah, sure, we'll find, these are the bits where it's worn and torn. you know it's amazing. Those integrations are incredible.
yeah. And working with when a FX artist and a good, like, both, when two people work together really well, I think the shots look really good. So especially when the effects in compo, because and lighter, of course, because when lighting's rendering, you give the right things, you just make the whole job a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, everything, your work looks its best when everyone else on that
Yeah,
shot has done good
yeah,
work.
yeah,
Yeah, otherwise it's
100%.
usually just cry. But if everyone is good, you look so much better. I mean, the amount of times you do, I've done something and
Except for when the
other people,
plate, except for when the plate is rubbish to begin with, which is when you're like, save me, please. I don't know whether this can be rescued.
yeah, I think the secret to good VFX really is shoot good plates
Yes.
and don't fuck them up. So, I did say don't swear, but I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
don't shoot good plates and don't mess them up
Yeah.
because that's it, really. It's just that simple, right? If you have good plates, you're going to get good shots.
Yeah.
As long as, and all you have to do as a VFX
Yeah.
artist is not mess it up.
Yeah.
Um, you can't save something, and as someone said, you can't polish a turd,
Yeah.
but you can roll it in glitter. Anyway, so I think this has been a brilliant. This is going to be, I think it's going to be a popular episode actually. I predict. This has been a really good chat, and I'm really looking forward to you. I might get you back to just talk pure Houdini stuff for another hour, like another point in time. Put in the comments if you want to hear up to just talking about Houdini and purely Houdini for an hour. I'm sure you do. If you're learning Houdini, tell us about it. If you've got a reel in Houdini, tell us about it.
Yeah.
So all
And if you
in the
want to
comments.
reach out to us and one of us, because we're always looking for cool FXTDs at all levels, reach out to us as well.
Brilliant. Yeah. So here we go. So I've really enjoyed this, and it was great to catch up with you again.
Thank you for having me.
And
It's been so nice. I feel like we haven't had a chance to catch up like this even when we were working together. So it's great. I think everybody should have a podcast so that we can
yeah,
talk.
even just catch up. Yeah, it's true. I mean, like it's very rare that you just get to sit with someone for an hour nowadays, and it's a shame. We do need to make time for that. So even if you don't have a podcast, just make sure you catch up with people for an hour
Yes,
on a
100%.
regular basis.
Yes.
Your friends and
And
colleagues.
just have like people sitting around and listening in.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you can just do that on the bus, and
Yeah.
people will listen in.
Yeah.
uh, Great. So I will enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you,
I'm going to
you
go
too.
and get my booster, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.